3:11 a.m. Naval Support Activity Bahrain. The Kingdom of Bahrain. The Persian Gulf. The air at this hour is warm and absolutely still. The particular stillness of a Gulf night in late August, when the temperature has not dropped below 32 degrees Celsius since June, and the humidity sits at a level that makes every surface damp to the touch. The base is lit the way military installations are always lit at this hour. Amber security lighting on the perimeter roads, white working lights over the aircraft parking areas, the glow of screens in the watch centers that never go dark. The waters of the Gulf are invisible beyond the base's eastern perimeter, black and flat, reflecting the lights of Manama's waterfront 3 miles to the north. Naval support activity. Bahrain is not a large base by the standards of American military installations. Its footprint is compact, a narrow peninsula of reclaimed land jutting into the Gulf south of Manama's commercial port. But what it lacks in size, it possesses in concentration of significance. NSA Bahrain is the headquarters of United States Naval Forces, Central Command, and of the United States Fifth Fleet, the command authority for all U.S. naval operations across an area of responsibility that spans 21 countries. The Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman, and parts of the Indian Ocean. It is the nerve center of American naval power projection across the most strategically consequential body of water on Earth. Within its perimeter, the headquarters building, where Fifth Fleet's commanding admiral and his staff directed all U.S. naval operations in the region. The Joint Operations Center, the Intelligence Fusion Cell, the communications infrastructure that connected Fifth Fleet to every U.S. naval vessel, every U.S. airbase, every U.S. ground force in the Central Command area of responsibility. Destroy NSA Bahrain, and you do not merely damage a base. You blind, deafen, and decapitate the command authority for the most powerful naval force ever assembled in the Middle East at 3:11 a.m., 108 miles to the north-northeast. From 4 dispersed locations across the Iranian province of Bushehr, and from 3 IRGC Aerospace Force mobile launcher batteries that had moved to pre-surveyed firing positions in the Zagros foothills 48 hours earlier. The final launch authorization was transmitted. The IRGC Aerospace Force had been planning Operation Decapitation for 22 months. Its target set was specific, its weapon selection deliberate, and its timing chosen with surgical care. The attack package consisted of 3 coordinated elements. First, 22 Fateh, 313 short-range ballistic missiles in a compressed simultaneous salvo, assigned to the headquarters building, the Joint Operations Center, the Intelligence Fusion Cell, the Communications Tower Complex, and the Power Generation Facility. The 6 structures whose destruction would render Fifth Fleet's command function permanently inoperable. Second, 34 Shahed 238 jet-powered loitering munitions launched in 3 successive waves, timed to arrive over the base at 6-minute intervals, targeting the base's radar installations, the pier where Fifth Fleet vessels were berthed, and the secondary communications infrastructure. Third, 16 Quds 4 terrain-following cruise missiles approaching from the northwest at low altitude, programmed to strike the base's fuel storage complex and the housing areas where Fifth Fleet's senior staff personnel resided. A secondary strike designed to complete the destruction after the ballistic salvo had suppressed the base's air defense. 72 weapons, 3 threat types, 2 approach axes, 1 synchronized window designed to exceed Fifth Fleet's defensive capacity before a coherent response could be organized. In Tehran, the IRGC Aerospace Force commander had told the Supreme National Security Council that Operation Decapitation would achieve something no Iranian military operation had ever attempted: the physical destruction of the command infrastructure through which American military power in the Gulf was exercised. Not a symbolic strike, not a provocation designed to generate a diplomatic response. A decapitation the removal of the head from the body of American naval presence in the Gulf in a single night's operation, before Washington could react, before Fifth Fleet could respond, before anyone in the base's housing areas had time to reach a shelter. He had made 6 catastrophic mistakes. First mistake: the Fateh 313 launch sites had been under continuous surveillance for 31 days. Following intelligence indicators generated by NSA collection against IRGC Aerospace Force communications that had identified planning activity consistent with a strike against a Gulf region U.S. installation, the National Reconnaissance Office had tasked surge imaging coverage against every known and suspected Fateh 313 storage and launch preparation facility within range of Bahrain. The 4 Bushehr Province launch sites and the 3 Zagros foothills mobile launcher positions had been identified progressively over a 31-day collection period. All 7 positions were in the 5th Fleet targeting database, with firing solutions current to within 4 hours when the attack began. The targeting packages had been preloaded into the Tomahawk cells of USS Monterey. The Ticonderoga-class cruiser berthed at NSA Bahrain's main pier, and into the strike assets of USS Dwight D. Aimler Eisenhower, operating in the Gulf of Oman 17 days before the attack. Second mistake: the IRGC's mobile launcher battery movements had been detected by a sensor network they had not accounted for. Bahrain's flat terrain and the Gulf's open geography created ideal conditions for a ground-based persistent radar network. Specifically, the AN/TPY-2X band radar system that had been operating from a classified position on Bahrain's northern coast for 4 years as part of the Gulf Cooperation Council's integrated air and missile defense architecture. The AN/TPY-2 had been tracking the 3 mobile launcher batteries from the moment they departed their garrison locations and began moving toward their firing positions in the Zagros foothills 48 hours earlier. Their positions, their bearing to NSO Bahrain, and the Fateh 313's computed trajectory from each firing point had been continuously updated in the THAAD Fire Control Systems Engagement database for 47 hours before the attack. Third mistake: NSA Bahrain was not defended by the air defense architecture that the IRGC's targeting model described. The IRGC planning cell had modeled a single Patriot PAC-2 battery as NSA Bahrain's primary missile defense, a capability that the IRGC engineers had assessed as insufficient to handle a 22-missile Fateh 313 salvo. The actual defensive architecture that had been assembled in the 47 hours since the mobile launcher repositioning was detected was substantially different. A Patriot PAC-3 MSE battery had been transferred from prepositioned storage in Qatar and was operational on NSA Bahrain's southern perimeter. A THAAD battery had been flown in from Al Udeid on Air Force C-17S and had achieved operational status 19 hours before the attack, positioned on the island's central elevation. And USS Monterey, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser berthed at the main pier, had her Aegis system in active search mode with SM-2 Block 3B interceptors ready in her forward VLS cells. 3 distinct defensive layers, 2 of which the IRGC did not know existed, against an attack that had been sized to defeat one. Fourth mistake: the personnel that Operation Decapitation was designed to destroy were not in the buildings it was targeting. The intelligence assessment that had identified the mobile launcher repositioning 48 hours earlier had triggered an immediate force protection response from the NSA Bahrain installation commander. Within 4 hours of the initial alert, 5th Fleet's commanding Admiral and his core staff had relocated to an alternate command post, a hardened facility 2 miles from the main base, its existence not publicized, its communications systems connected to the same networks as the main headquarters, but physically separate from every building in the IRGC's target set. The Joint Operations Center's watch staff had been reduced to a minimum essential crew. with the majority of personnel relocated to hardened shelter positions. The base's housing areas had been evacuated of senior staff personnel, who had moved to dispersed hotel accommodations in Manama under security escort. The buildings that Operation Decapitation was targeting were intact, but functionally empty of the command personnel they were designed to remove. Fifth mistake: the Quds-4 cruise missiles approach route passed directly through the engagement envelope of an asset the IRGC had no record of. USS Jason Dunham, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer that had been operating under partial emissions control in the northern Gulf, had been repositioned to a station 12 miles northwest of Bahrain, specifically to cover the low-altitude approach corridor that the IRGC was using for the Quds-4 cruise missiles. Her AN/SPY-1D radar in active search mode had been tracking the Quds-4S from their emergence off the Iranian coast, acquired at 63 miles as they descended to their terrain-following profile over the Gulf water. The engagement solution was fully computed before the missiles reached the midpoint of their transit. USS Jason Dunham was not in any IRGC intelligence database as operating in that sector. She had moved to her station at 1:44 a.m., 87 minutes before the attack, in direct response to the pre-attack intelligence that the AN/T-PY2 network had generated. Sixth mistake: the Shahed 238 launch timing had been compromised by a signals intelligence collection operation that identified the launch sequence authorization codeword 18 hours before the attack. The NSA collection architecture targeting IRGC Aerospace Force internal communications had intercepted and partially decrypted the launch authorization message, as it was transmitted in a final coordination exchange between the IRGC Aerospace Force Command in Tehran and the Shahed 238 launch site commanders at 9:17 a.m. the previous day. The partial decryption, sufficient to identify the attack's timing window, but not its precise target set, had been transmitted to NSA Bahrain at 9:44 a.m. 17 hours and 27 minutes of strategic warning. In those 17 hours, NSA Bahrain had transitioned from a base conducting normal operations to a base in which the personnel were sheltered. The command function had relocated. The defensive architecture had tripled, and every strike asset within range had been assigned a pre-computed targeting solution against the identified launch infrastructure. What happened in the next 28 minutes neutralized 72 weapons and reduced 7 IRGC launch sites, 3 command facilities, and the IRGC Aerospace Force's primary cruise missile development infrastructure to inoperable wreckage before dawn. At 3:11 a.m., the THAAD battery's AN/T-PY-2 radar registered the thermal signatures of 22 Fateh 313 motor ignitions across 7 firing positions within a 51-second window. The alert reached the THAAD Fire Control Station, USS Monterey's CIC, the PAC-3 battery's Fire Control Center, and the alternate command post where 5th Fleet's Admiral was monitoring the tactical picture simultaneously. The entire alert propagation taking under 3 seconds across the hardened communications network that connected all 4 nodes. The THAAD battery engaged the highest priority Fateh 313 tracks immediately. 12 THAAD interceptors launched in a rapid sequence, targeting the 12 missiles on trajectories assigned to the headquarters building and the Joint Operations Center, the 2 structures whose destruction was the IRGC's top priority. The THAAD engagement altitude and the Fateh 313's trajectory from the Zagros foothills firing positions produced an intercept geometry that was close to optimal, mid-course phase above the atmosphere over Iranian territory. 11 clean kinetic neutralizations. 1 Fateh 313 survived the THAAD engagement and continued toward terminal phase. USS Monterey Aegis engaged the remaining 10 Fateh 313 missiles simultaneously. The missiles assigned to the communications complex the intelligence fusion cell, and the power generation facility. SM-2, Block 3B interceptors fired in pairs, guided by USS Monterey's illumination radar at the terminal descent angles that the pre-computed solutions had specified. 8 neutralized in the first engagement sequence. 2 survived and entered the close-in defense zone, where the PAC-3 MSE battery engaged both with its high-velocity kinetic interceptors. Both were neutralized. The single Fateh 313 that had survived the THAAD layer was also in the PAC-3 MSE engagement zone and was taken in the same intercept sequence. 22. Fateh 313 ballistic missiles. 22 neutralized. 0 impacted NSA Bahrain. The 16 Quds-4 cruise missiles were engaged by USS Jason Dunham at extended range, 39 miles from NSA Bahrain's perimeter, well outside any warhead detonation radius that could threaten the base. SM-2 missiles, guided by USS Jason Dunham's SPY-1D illumination sequence, engaged in a ripple firing pattern beginning at 3:14 a.m. 12 Quds-4 missiles were neutralized in the outer engagement layer between 39 and 22 miles from the base. 4 survived the first intercept attempt and continued inbound. USS Monterey engaged all 4 with SM-2 in the middle engagement layer at 17 miles. 3 were neutralized. 1 survived and was engaged by NSA Bahrain's Shored, the short-range air defense Stinger missile teams that had been on elevated alert since 9:44 p.m. the previous evening. At 2 miles, it was neutralized. Its debris impacted the Gulf surface 400 meters from NSA Bahrain's eastern perimeter berm. No facility was struck. 16 Quds-4 cruise missiles. 16 neutralized. 0 impacts. The 34 Shahed 238 drones were engaged by FA-18E Super Hornets from USS Eisenhower, airborne since 2:47 a.m. The first wave of 12 was met at extended range, 9 neutralized by AIM-9X before the Bahraini coast, 3 by Avenger Stinger systems at the base perimeter. The second and third waves of 22 were intercepted by additional Super Hornet pairs, 18 over the Gulf, 4 at the inner perimeter by Stinger teams, 34 Shahed 238 drones, 34 neutralized, 0 reached any base facility, 72 weapons, 72 neutralized, NSA Bahrain undamaged, 5th Fleet Headquarters building intact, Joint Operations Center intact, Intelligence Fusion Cell intact, Communications Complex intact, Power Generation intact, Pier facilities intact, all personnel in hardened shelter or at alternate positions. 0 U.S. casualties, now 5th Fleet answered. At 3:14 a.m., 3 minutes after the first Fateh 313 launched, USS Monterey fired her first Tomahawk salvo. The preloaded targeting packages required no additional computation. 26 missiles pre-assigned to the 7 IRGC launch sites. The 4 Bushehr Province fixed launch positions received 4 Tomahawks each. The 3 mobile launcher firing positions in the Zagros foothills, whose TEL vehicles were now in their post-launch dispersal movement, tracked continuously by the AN/TPY-2 network, received 3 Tomahawks, each directed at the launcher vehicle's dispersal routes, updated in real time by the Space Force satellite feed. The Bushehr sites were struck between 3:31 a.m. and 3:38 a.m. The launch infrastructure, the fixed launch rails, the propellant storage, the fire control equipment, the support vehicles, was rendered inoperable at all 4 positions. The Zagros foothills mobile launcher vehicles, 2 of which had not yet reached their first dispersal waypoints, were struck on their movement routes between 3:34 a.m. and 3:41 a.m. All 3 TEL vehicles were rendered inoperable before they reached cover. USS Jason Dunham fired simultaneously. 20 Tomahawks at 3:15 a.m., targeting the IRGC Aerospace Force Regional Command Facility at Shiraz and the Quds 4 coastal launch infrastructure north of Bushehr. The Shiraz facility received 12 Tomahawks between 3:33 a.m. and 3:36 a.m. The Operations Building, Communications Center, Backup Command Post, and Intelligence Facility all struck and rendered inoperable. The Quds 4 launch infrastructure received the remaining 8. USS Eisenhower's full strike package was airborne by 3:29 a.m. 18 aircraft total, 8 F-35C Lightning IIs, 6 F/A-18E Super Hornets, 4 EA-18G Growlers. The EA-18Gs activated their jamming at 3:41 a.m., flooding the Iranian coastal air defense radar frequencies with coordinated broadband interference that degraded tracking coherence across the Bushehr and Fars province air defense sectors. The F-35Cs carried JASSM-ER cruise missiles assigned to the IRGC Aerospace Force's primary Shahed 238 production and storage facility at Isfahan. The installation, where the 34 drones that had been launched against NSA Bahrain had been manufactured, tested, and prepared for operational deployment. 16 Jasmi-R missiles impacted the Isfahan facility's 4 main structures between 4:14 a.m. and 4:19 a.m. The production building, the final assembly facility, the testing range infrastructure, and the storage complex were rendered inoperable. The secondary detonations from stored munitions burned for over 2 hours. The 6 FA-18E Super Hornets struck the Fateh 313 assembly and maintenance complex at Parchin with 24 GBU-31 JDAMs. The assembly building, warhead storage, guidance calibration center, maintenance complex, and launch vehicle workshop were all rendered inoperable between 4:22 a.m. and 4:27 a.m. B-1B Lancer bombers, pre-positioned over the Gulf of Oman, received their strike tasking at 3:19 a.m. 2 B-1Bs carrying 24 GBU-31 JDAMs each struck 6 IRGC Aerospace Force command and control infrastructure facilities across Bushehr, Fars, and Khuzestan provinces between 4:03 a.m. and 4:18 a.m. All 6 were rendered inoperable. The IRGC Aerospace Force's ability to coordinate follow-on Gulf operations was comprehensively degraded. The full accounting, compiled by NSA Bahrain and NavCent by 6 a.m., 72 weapons launched against Naval Support Activity Bahrain, 72 neutralized before any impact on any base facility. NSA Bahrain, undamaged. 5th Fleet Headquarters Building, intact. Joint Operations Center, intact. Intelligence Fusion Cell, intact. All base facilities, undamaged. U.S. military and civilian personnel who sustained fatal outcomes, 0. U.S. aircraft rendered inoperable, 0. USS Monterey, undamaged. USS Jason Dunham, undamaged. 5th Fleet's commanding admiral resumed operations from the alternate command post at 4 a.m. and transferred back to the main headquarters building at 5:22 a.m. after the post-strike assessment confirmed that no follow-on threat existed and all base facilities were undamaged. The headquarters building, the primary target of Operation Decapitation, was occupied and operational before sunrise. In retaliation, 7 IRGC Fateh 313 launch sites rendered inoperable, 3 TEL vehicles rendered inoperable on dispersal routes, IRGC Aerospace Force Regional Command Facility at Shiraz rendered inoperable, Quds 4 Coastal Launch Infrastructure rendered inoperable, Shahed 238 Production and Storage Facility at Isfahan rendered inoperable with major secondary detonations, Fateh 313 Assembly and Maintenance Complex at Parchin rendered inoperable. 6 IRGC Aerospace Force communications and radar relay facilities rendered inoperable. IRGC Aerospace Force personnel who sustained fatal outcomes across all strike packages. 211 at 5:47 a.m., the duty officer at 5th Fleet's Joint Operations Center submitted his standard end-of-watch report. It documented the engagement, listed the intercepts, and noted one line that required no elaboration. Command and control of U.S. naval forces had not been interrupted at any point during the engagement. 5th Fleet had maintained continuous command authority throughout. The Joint Operations Center, that was supposed to be in ruins before dawn, was writing its morning report. The Admiral was at his desk. The pier was preparing to berth the rotation ship at 800. In Tehran, the IRGC Aerospace Force commander faced an assessment that contained none of the outcomes he had promised. 72 weapons, 0 buildings damaged, 0 personnel casualties. NSA Bahrain had known the attack was coming for 17 hours, had positioned 3 defensive layers the IRGC did not know existed, had relocated its key personnel, and had preloaded its strike responses before the first motor ignited. You cannot decapitate a command that moved its head before you swung. The Gulf is watched. NSA Bahrain stands. 5th Fleet commands. This is what happens when you target the headquarters of the United States 5th Fleet. You find that the signals intelligence community identified your authorization message 18 hours before you transmitted it to your launch crews. You find that your mobile launcher repositioning was tracked from the moment your vehicles left their garrison, that your firing positions were in an American targeting database 47 hours before you fired. You find that the building you designed your entire operation to destroy was empty when your missiles arrived. Its occupants relocated to a hardened alternate position that had been activated before your first TEL vehicle reached its firing point. You launched 72 weapons at the nerve center of American naval power in the Gulf. Every one is neutralized. The buildings are intact. The Admiral is at his desk, and your launch infrastructure is inoperable before the sun rises. 5th Fleet commands. It always will.